Welcome to the Grid Podcast, Special Edition, episode number 3. Our goal is to educate and to bring hard-hitting truths about America's critical infrastructure. These podcasts are supported by the Foundation for Infrastructure Resiliency. It's a non-political 501c3. Political opinions expressed in the podcast by participants are their own and not necessarily that of FIR. Additionally, FIR does not endorse or assure accuracy of information presented. We invite you to please do your own research into the topics. And with that said, please hit the subscribe and notification button so you will be notified when we go live. And of course, like the video. And this will get around all the censorship and promotes us inside the YouTube algorithm. So today's topic is geopolitics and the grid. Should we be worried? We have another phenomenal guest joining us, David Pyne. And David currently serves as Deputy Executive Director of the Task Force on National and Homeland Security and as Chairman of the Utah Republican Veterans Caucus and as a West Valley Police Honorary Colonel. David previously served as the President of the National and Homeland Security and as a Defense and Foreign Policy Advisor in 2024 to presidential candidate Vivek Ramaswamy. He previously served as National Security Policy Director for Utah's U.S. Senator Mike Lee. David was the founder of Senator Lee's Military Advisory Committee and is the Vice President of the Association of the United States Army's Utah chapter and as the second Vice President of the Salt Lake Total Force chapter of the Military Officers Association of America. He also serves as Chairman, Vice President of the Utah State Legislative Compensation Commission, and he's been in that capacity since 2009 through 2017. So let's dive right in. Without further ado, welcome, David.
Hey, Maria, thanks so much for having me on.
Yeah, so we got a couple of, just to kind of give the audience a little flavor of the things we're going to talk about, and I'll just let you take it away from there. So we're going to be looking at increasing Sino-Russian nuclear superiority over the U.S. That was highlighted during the recent Chinese military parade in Beijing on September 3rd. I mean, we can just start with that topic and just go down the list.
Yeah, absolutely. So, September 3rd was the Beijing military parade. It was their commemoration of what they view as a Chinese victory over Japan in World War II. Of course, it was a Chinese victory along with our victory, but it wasn't really a Chinese communist victory in a sense because they didn't really fight Japan. They had a deal that they would not fight the Japanese, and the war was fought and won by the nationalists, essentially. But that being said, their military parade was perhaps the most impressive that I've ever seen. Reportedly showcased about 76 different weapon systems, of which I think 46 are newly deployed or operational as of 2024. It included a number of strategic nuclear delivery systems, among which were the DF-61, which I think has maximum number of warheads of 14 or perhaps even 15. The DF-5C, which has 12 warheads, and that's kind of a newer model of their oldest ICBM, the DF-5. They also had the DF-31. I think it was the BF or the BG. But essentially, that's a potentially silo-based version of their previous DF-31, which is kind of a mid-range ICBM. And then they also had kind of a knockoff of the F-35 and the which is the J-35, and the F-22, which is the J-20. And then they had a number of strategic missile defense systems, which, in my estimation, are superior to our own. The most impressive of which was the HQ-29, which is compared to the Russian S-500 and S-550. But we know that U.S. intelligence detected a massive expansion of the Chinese nuclear arsenal in 2020. That went public in 2021. Dr. Peter Pry, of course, our visionary and courageous former executive director, and I both kind of warned about the scale of that expansion, and he stated that he thought the expansion would be to 4,000 warheads, and I concur with that assessment. And I think they're mostly completed with that nuclear warhead buildup. U.S. intelligence has been way behind the power curve. They've been underestimating the size of China's nuclear arsenal by a factor of four. They
Mhm.
estimate it'll be 1,000 by 2030 and 1,500 by 2035. But China's not, they're not shooting for parity with the U.S., they're shooting for nuclear superiority. And in my estimation, they've already achieved it.
Yes, I agree. I wholeheartedly agree. Um, which brings me to an interesting aspect of this Chinese military parade and recent news in the last week regarding uh, what can be considered a rather aggressive move by the Chinese around Taiwan. Um, do you have anything to add to what might be going on there? There seems to be more news coverage outside of the U.S. on this than inside.
Well, I haven't seen a whole lot recently. I was just reading this morning that they were massing amphibious vessels along the Chinese coastline. That
Yep.
not just in the vicinity of Taiwan, but also within a 270-mile radius. So there clearly is some activity. It's not the massive activity we saw, I think, last November with the Joint Sword. I think it was uh, Joint Sword 2024B. They had, of course, two or three massive joint naval air blockade exercises, which they were on a scale we've never seen before, including up to 90 to 150 Chinese warships, including maritime or maritime marine, I think it's called, and also their Coast Guard, in addition to PLA Navy ships. And they're clearly getting ready to make a move. I've been predicting it for some time. I think 2027 is likely their deadline. It's not their first year of having the capability. I think they've had it since 2020. But they just keep, massively increasing their capabilities in terms of, ballistic missiles, anti-ship cruise missiles, hypersonic missiles.
Mhm.
We saw a lot of those paraded at the Beijing military parade, as well as their naval buildup. And they have a huge number of roll-on, roll-off ships in the 10,000 ton range, which they stopped using for ferries between China and Taiwan, and have converted to purely military use. Those being, of course, dual-use military ships, with which China typically a lot of their civilian um, ships and vessels and other assets are convertible from civilian to military use.
Mhm. That is very true. Um, so obviously, with that show of military superiority, what countries aside from China are likely to have, for example, super EMP satellites in orbit and things that could take down America's critical infrastructure, as well as I want to mention these too, is mobile deployable hot air balloons.
Yeah, that's a great question. Well, of course, we know that China has stratospheric balloons, which can be used for regional EMP detonations over the U.S. One of our task force members did an outstanding paper that talked about how they could actually deploy stratospheric air balloons just outside U.S. airspace and still blanket, our coastal military bases with EMP to potentially take down our grid, but more importantly, even take down our military bases that are key. Among which are, of course, our Kings Bay, where we have our nuclear missile submarines in Georgia, as well as Bangor, Washington. on the West Coast. So, in addition to that, we know that North Korea obviously has super EMP satellites.
Mhm.
Back in 2023, both Tommy Waller and myself wrote articles about Iran likely having super EMP satellites. I think we published them the same day. He beat me to it. I had a better article, of course, but he yeah he showed how the Nor 2 and Nor 3 Iranian satellites are still in orbit, and they're in orbit around 285 miles over the U.S. So they can, which is an optimal EMP attack vector in terms of altitude to blanket the entire continental United States with super EMP emissions. So that's very concerning because it was assessed by the Congressional EMP Commission that up to 90% of Americans could die from that. So we're talking around up to 255 million American citizens could perish from that. Russia, of course, just last year, I think we had some revelations by I think it was it was the former House Intel chair that assessed that revealed that Russia had super EMP capabilities. It didn't assess that they were deployed, but it assessed that they had those capabilities that could be launched. I think with not a lot of warning. Of course, they've had FOBS capabilities, fractional orbital bombardment system capabilities since 1967 during the Soviet days, and that, of course, is why we signed the Outer Space Treaty of 1967 to ban specifically nuclear weapons from space. But unfortunately, super EMPs are by definition nuclear weapons, and so we know
Right.
that North Korea has them. I assess that Iran likely has them. There's no reason to believe that Russia and China don't have them as well. If China doesn't have them, they have the capability. They have the FOBS capability with hypersonic glide vehicles to put nuclear weapons in orbit, or simply to have a global strike capability with being able to get those into space and then drop them, in Washington D.C. or whatever targets they want with little warning that could not only badly degrade our NC3 capabilities in terms of nuclear command and control and communications, but also potentially take out the national command authority, including the president and the vice president.
Yeah. I, just for our audience, maybe some might not know exactly what an EMP is, and maybe explain a little bit what it is. And as you mentioned earlier, it is a nuclear device, but what is the EMP portion of it? Just to clarify that for the audience.
Yeah, so Super EMP describes essentially a specially modified nuclear weapon that's actually fairly low yield, but it is specifically designed to maximize the electromagnetic pulse effects of a nuclear device. Nuclear detonations all have EMP effects. Ground bursts, of course, have the smallest. In order to have like a large EMP blanketing effect, I think we've assessed it has to be around 30 miles or above. As I mentioned, the higher up, the greater the area of effect. What I sometimes refer to as an EMP pancake, because it's like a circle in which there could be devastation to electronic systems. So there's multiple different super geomagnetic storms have EMP effects as well. We had the Carrington event back in, I think it was the 1850s, where the entire planet, I think, was hit with a G5 super geomagnetic storm. And thankfully, we didn't have a lot of electronic systems back then, but there were some pretty crazy effects.
Yep.
And we think that the effects would be far worse because we're so electronically dependent that for our critical infrastructure, that just the basic systems we rely on to survive in terms of our food distribution network, our transportation network, our water purification distribution systems would be potentially disabled, perhaps permanently, by EMP either attack or man-made EMP attack, or else naturally occurring geomagnetic storm, which would be in the severe G5 range.
Okay, perfect. Um, well, talking about EMPs, does Iran have a nuclear arsenal and super EMP satellites?
Yeah, another great question. So, Dr. Peter Pry wrote articles along with James Woolsey, a former CI director, and I think it was William Graham, who was a great nuclear expert, that Iran likely does have and has had nuclear weapons for some time. I think they first wrote about it around 2016.
Mhm.
Um, and essentially, I mean, if you go back in time, Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu has been warning of uh, Iranian nuclear weapons since around 1995, saying at the time that they were months away from
Right.
getting nuclear weapons. Of course, that was 30 years ago.
Yeah.
And they also, a lot of people don't realize, and this has been disputed, of course, but there's a CIA assessment, a minority assessment, that Iran was successful in buying nuclear weapons from Kazakhstan, a former Soviet republic, in
Mhm.
1992. They purchased three or four, reportedly. So they were, I don't think those were usable, though they weren't operational because they didn't have the launch codes, but they most likely were able to reverse engineer it and kind of get to the point where Dr. Pry assessed that by 2003, they were only 3 months away from weaponizing that nuclear weapons technology. So, in all likelihood, I mean, there's really just two possibilities. They've either made the decision not to, they had the technology and they made the decision not to weaponize it, or the more likely possibility is that they've just they have weaponized it. They have a small, modest-sized nuclear arsenal that they've deployed on their MRBMs and IRBMs, and of course super EMP satellites, as a deterrent, but without announcing it. Because if they, just like Israel, if Israel, it's the worst kept secret in the world that Israel, of course, has nuclear weapons, and Iran likely does as well. But the
Yeah.
reason they don't announce it is because they would be subjected to potentially massive international sanctions.
Yeah. And I don't know if you know this. I ran across this maybe a few months ago, but there was a rail line that was just completed from the westernmost part of China all the way to Tehran. And it's basically built for troop movement and equipment movement. It's therefore bypassing all US sanctions because now it's over land. I don't know if you knew that, or if you did,
No, it wasn't.
what would you like to
I
comment on?
heard that.
Yeah, yeah. I'll send you the article. Maybe I'll post it in the description as well. But yeah, they it just completed probably in the last 12 months. So now we don't know what's being shipped.
Yeah,
Oh,
yeah.
I know
So
that.
Russia and China have been sending weapons like crazy to Iran
Yeah,
ever since we bombed them in June.
right.
So they could reconstitute their nuclear production capabilities, as well as deploy advanced SAM systems, S-400s, Russian ABMs, as well as uh, Chinese and other weapon systems. And reportedly, there's a sale being considered right now of 48 Russian Su-35 air superiority fighters that they could use
Wow.
to shoot down our B-2s. That could maybe take a year or more to before that they arrive in Iran, but I think that's very likely that Iran will fall through on that sale
So,
purchase.
yeah, based on all that, what do you believe is the DEFCON alert status right now?
Well, there is a website. I forget what it's called, but it's a DEF CON
Yeah,
threat assessment website. Of course, it's an estimate because our DEFCON. A defense condition is classified.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, you're not supposed to talk about it. Sometimes people do, but they allude to it. But based on that, their assessment is we're at DEFCON 5, which is the lowest defense readiness condition. So that's what we had during the Biden years. And I've been arguing that we should be at DEFCON 3 or 4 until the Ukraine war
Yeah.
ends, because we're at a heightened state of danger for a potential Russian, limited nuclear first strike, or of course, Taiwan is still in, powder keg that could explode at any moment. With
Yeah.
as we discussed earlier, with the Chinese blockade or invasion. And October is the best month to do it. October is
Yeah.
arguably the best month of the year in terms of the sea states of the Taiwan Straits. April is the second best month. I say second best because April is followed by monsoon season in the Straits, so they have a more limited attack window. But in terms of a blockade, that's something that can materialize any time of the year. But in terms of transporting troops and tanks and equipment across the Straits, we'd be much more likely to see that in kind of the April or October timeframe.
Yeah. Now you mentioned Ukraine. So, what are your thoughts on the U.S. involvement in NATO's proxy war in Ukraine, and the potential for the U.S.'s involvement between the People's Republic of China, Taiwan, how that could escalate, maybe possibly into World War III? I mean, what does that look like right now if we had to take a picture in time?
Well, I agree with Dr. Peter Pry, who assessed before his passing in 2022 that the U.S. was playing with nuclear fire,
Mm.
by having this large-scale war, unnecessary war in Ukraine, that was really fought over Ukraine's NATO membership. Putin basically he called Biden on December 7th, 2021, and said, if you agree to give me a written guarantee that Ukraine will never join NATO, then I won't invade. And Biden said, we don't accept Russian red lines. And of course, we've been crossing Russian red lines ever since. And unfortunately, Putin's put out there that they have, there's a nuclear red line that Russia has, and of course they've expressed that in their latest changes to their nuclear doctrine. I think it was late last year, around November of 2024, and they basically made it so that Russian nuclear use, presumably non-strategic nuclear use, would be authorized in the event that a non-nuclear power that was backed up by nuclear powers struck their nuclear triad, which of course we know they did with Operation Spiderweb in June, when they destroyed or damaged around 16% of Russia's nuclear bomber fleet, as well as previously they attacked Russia's ballistic missile defense radars, essentially damaged one. We think so that it was rendered disabled. I think that was 2023, but it was essentially the southwest sector of Russia that potentially could blind them to, U.S. Nuclear missile strikes from the southwest direction. And then, they've also attacked Sevastopol, which is, of course, Russia's Black Sea Fleet's, naval base, and that they have many ships there that are equipped with nuclear weapons. Primarily their submarines, but also we believe some of their surface ships as well. So the more President Trump decides to send these long-range missiles, the ERAMs. We know that there was an ERAM sale. The White House has stated that they've already agreed to with Ukraine to ship them 3,550 ERAM missiles. Those are air-launched cruise missiles that can be fired from Ukrainian F-16s with potentially U.S. Air Force pilots that have reportedly been flying them, retired, of course. But that's what we've heard from General Keane, Jack Keane on Fox News.
Mm-hmm.
And every one of these steps, the Tomahawk sale that Trump says he's still seriously considering, where those Tomahawk missiles have a range of 1,550 miles that could hit anywhere inside of European Russia, Moscow, perhaps even the entrances to Yamantau Mountain, and I think it's Kaminsky Mountain, the two massive underground nuclear command centers and underground cities the size of Washington, D.C., Beltway, that were built with billions and billions of dollars to help ensure Russia's leadership survival in the event of nuclear war with the U.S. Every one of those steps that we're taking, that Biden took, that Trump is taking now, is pushing us closer to potential nuclear war with Russia. And again, that would likely start out as a Russian nuclear escalation against Ukraine, perhaps even against Brussels or NATO frontline states, but most likely would escalate, not most likely, could conceivably escalate to a full nuclear exchange with Russia that is really over a war that's being fought over between two dictators over a border dispute in the Donbass region.
Yep. Yeah. You mentioned a lot of sabotage against, well, probably on both sides, but one that was actually rather significant, and I believe no one has laid claim as to who did it, was the gas line, I believe in the Baltic, that basically was really a lifeline to Europe from Russia, right? Um, and um, and the reaction from Russia in response, actually, I found that it was rather uh, patient with Putin. You can say a lot about him, but when that was a pipeline that brought Russia a lot of dollars, and now it's gone. So, what are your thoughts on that one? I'm just curious more for myself than anything else on that. But you don't
Yeah,
know
I think it
a lot.
was just weeks before that Russia invaded Ukraine that Biden gave had some kind of meeting with some NATO leaders where he
Mhm.
stated that that pipeline would be gone if Russia invaded Ukraine. He didn't, and he was asked again, what do you mean gone? He said it be gone.
Oh,
Just said that inferred that we would destroy it, or we would, we are allies, and of course there was that Seymour Hirsch article that came out. I think it was the fall of 2022 or maybe early 2023 that said the U.S. did do it, and it was U.S. Navy SEALs, and we actually had kind of a joint naval exercise in the Baltic. Um, I think it was around June of 2022.
yeah,
And essentially, what his sources said is that we planted the explosives on uh, presumably the three that were destroyed, but perhaps the fourth as well. Maybe they didn't go off, um, since there was one surviving pipeline that was not destroyed. And then just flipped the switch in September, and that caused President Trump to say that we've never been closer to World War III, and then of course Biden followed it up and said the same thing early the next month, saying that speaking to Democratic fundraisers that we'd never been this close to nuclear war since the Cuban Missile Crisis, and I think that's an accurate assessment. It was
yeah.
reflective of U.S. intel that was being reported at the time and through open sources that I wrote about. Um, I didn't have the percentages. It turned out to be 50% chance of nuclear escalation from Russia at the time, as assessed by U.S. intelligence, up from 5% at the start of the war. But yeah, that's clearly was the U.S. The cover stories that it was Ukrainians operating without Zelensky's
Mhm.
authorization. The chances that Ukraine could pull that off without U.S. or British you know, deep sea naval divers are pretty much non-existent, in my opinion.
Yeah, agreed. I just wanted to bring that up because I believe there have been several incidents, and that's one of them that has really sort of pushed the envelope, always getting on the verge of major conflict. And speaking of that, how close is the U.S. uh, if you were to have a race of three countries, 100-meter dash, I could say, what what is the U.S. How where would it rank in the race against Russia and China?
Well, I think we've declined to the third largest nuclear power. I mean, we haven't built, with the exception of some Trident II missiles that we deployed in the 2000s, and I think shortly after 2010. I think the last one was deployed in 2013ish. We have not either built any strategic nuclear weapons warheads. We haven't built any nuclear. We haven't had any new strategic nuclear delivery systems since 1992. Actually, it was 1990, of course, that the Trident II SLBM was deployed on our nuclear missile submarines. So in that time, since 1990, Russia, China, and North Korea have all deployed probably, I would say, 25 strategic nuclear delivery systems. I still need to count the exact number, but it's just an amazing number of systems. And Russia, of course, has modernized its. I think they're about 95% modernized in terms of their strategic nuclear triad. Probably the ones that have been modernized are more their bear bombers, which are ancient, like our B-52s.
Hmm.
But in terms of their missiles, their ICBMs, their SLBMs, I think they're fully modernized systems built and deployed within the last 20 years. The U.S., on the other hand, of course, we have our Minuteman III that was first deployed 55 years ago with a expected lifespan of 10 years. And of course, we've had multiple life extensions since then, so that they're um, mostly reliable. But we're at the point where their reliability cannot be guaranteed because they're so old. And we still have another plan, I guess, to extend their life, a life of service, and their service life rather. And I'm really dubious about it, but we kind of have to, because the Sentinel ICBM, which is the replacement for the Minuteman III, is not coming online until I think 2031. Initially, it was going to be 2029 for initial operating capability. Um, in terms of the Trident twos, we're going to keep those around for some decades more, and just put them in our Columbia nuclear missile submarines that are also behind schedule by a year or two. The B-21 nuclear bomber is either on schedule or ahead of schedule, but I would say that the air leg of our nuclear triad is the least important. It's the least capable in terms of reaction time. So we really are just really late to capability, or late to need is what our Stratcom commanders call it, because we're so far behind the power curve of Russia and Chinese nuclear capabilities. And it's not just qualitative. They have more advanced warheads, they have more advanced missile systems, um, but it's also quantity. Russia has they have the capability to build 3,000 nuclear warheads per year. According to U.S. intelligence, we have the capability. We haven't even that I've seen. I checked just several months ago. We haven't even built a nuclear warhead from scratch since 1992. So that's we were supposed to be building 80 nuclear warheads a year. That was the goal. We're way behind that. I think we built maybe 15. I think using our nuclear plutonium pits that are in the inventory. Yeah, we're definitely behind the power curve, and that's why I describe Russia and China together as having nuclear supremacy over the U.S. Not just nuclear superiority, but nuclear supremacy. There was a report by Ukraine, a classified report from their Ministry of Defense, that estimated the size of Russia's nuclear arsenal at 16,000, including 6,000 strategic warheads and 10,000 non-strategic warheads. We, of course, have, based on my estimates, about 2,285 operational warheads. And a lot of those warheads are reserved warheads. They're not operationally deployed, but they could be on short notice.
Yeah, which brings me to an interesting question, considering we're not investing in our military strength as we ought to. The fact that we allocated 500 billion to AI data centers versus strengthening our military capabilities. What are your thoughts on that? I mean, why? put so much money into building AI data centers when obviously not only is the threat external, meaning nuclear attack, super EMP, but with the border open the way it has been over the last 5, 6 years, what I believe the enemy's already here inside within our borders. So they don't need to launch missiles at us. They're already here. What are your thoughts on the enemy within?
Yeah, you're absolutely right. I mean, there's 100,000 PLA soldiers that we believe to be already in the U.S. that have crossed our southern and northern borders, and that's the equivalent of two PLA group armies.
Mhm.
I think they have 24 total. It's the equivalent of two. Basically, 8 to 10% of their PLA strength is likely in the U.S. Right now. Um, Actually, I think it's closer to 5 or 6%, but still a massive number of Chinese soldiers deployed on Chinese-owned farmlands near 17 key U.S. military bases, and that's just astounding that we would allow that. And President Trump hasn't, he has not brought the attention to that. I'm not even sure if he's doing anything to roll that back. I mean, our number one priority shouldn't be defending against narco terrorists or even murderers and rapists. It should be rounding up and throwing out of the country every Chinese military age man we can find, especially the ones that are located in the farmlands near our military bases as a potentially existential threat. Because
Exactly.
if uh, if we were to go to war with China, they could potentially defeat us without firing a single missile from Chinese territory,
Hmm.
because these troops could be used for assassination, sabotage, taking down our grid. They could have short range missiles or rockets, to for regional super EMP weapons. They could even have biological weapons that they could
Yes.
spread. That's probably a lower chance of that, because obviously there's a lot of blowback potentially to Chinese citizens from that, but also potentially Club K missiles that they could use. There's container ships.
Yes.
China has a massive number of container ships at every port. Every time I go to LA and tour
Long
uh,
Beach.
Battleship, Battleship Iowa and Long Beach, I
Mhm.
see the Chinese container ships in the harbor that have unloaded all kinds of stuff, and we only inspect 1% of those containers. What's in
Yep.
them? So they could potentially have nuclear warheads. They could have nuclear missiles, supersonic missiles, which, if that container were mounted on a diesel truck and driven to the DC or Capitol area or Stratcom headquarters, they could launch those missiles at short range, maybe a range of 50 miles, and potentially engage in a nuclear decapitation first strike against the U.S. and our NC3 system. So that's something I think we can't over estimate the threat that poses, and I'd love to see a lot more attention by U.S. policymakers on that threat.
Yeah, I agree. I agree wholeheartedly. I think um, they're they're already within, and they're in many large U.S. cities. The Chinese have police departments. Notice that, right? They have police
Right.
departments. Yes, they do. If you haven't heard it, just Google it. It's there. And they also have in California. There were many, well, at least two, and I think there's others in other states. But biochemical labs that
In
were
California.
exposed in
Yep.
California. Yep.
That's right.
So the enemy's already within, and it is not being addressed, and that's a huge concern because not only do we have the external threat, but internally we've opened all our doors and windows and allowed all the flies in. So it's the best way I can explain it, right? Um,
Yeah.
but with everything that is happening in the world around us, what is it that the average American should be doing and thinking? what can we what are steps we can take to protect our families, our communities, our cities? What
Yeah, well, at a macro level, it's almost too late, I would say, to like build up, or I mean, not to build up our nuclear arsenal. I think that's something we could do pretty quickly. Missile defenses. That's hopefully we'll have a national missile defense system in the next 3 years. Grid hardening. That I think that could take 2 to 5 years after it's fully funded, and there's no funding mechanism at this point, or that we see
Mhm.
happening. Congress has refused to pass the Grid Act, of course, and the Shield Act, and every bill other than that, other than SEPA, which didn't fund any grid hardening, but it did some other important measures that in terms of planning for EMP defense. But other than that, it's diplomacy is the key. The
Right.
peace agreement that Russia or that Trump announced for Israel and Hamas. That's really should be the model for how we can end wars and the war in Ukraine. That's probably the biggest one. We really need to, and I'm sorry, I'm addressing the macro level first
Oh
because
yeah, perfect.
I
Yeah.
think, yeah, I think that U.S. citizens can, talk with their members of Congress and tell them how important it is that they promote a policy of peace, a peace through strength. It's a
Right.
lot of people don't realize that peace through strength actually involves peace. It doesn't involve starting all these new wars, as we've seen U.S. leaders do recently with regards to Iran and of course Yemen. But actually resolving conflicts, and President Nixon talked about the need to not appease Russia
Mhm.
and China, but to accommodate their vital interests in a reciprocal way, so that we give up something, and they give up something in return. And that's of course how Reagan ended the Cold War successfully and brought down the Soviet Union, was through this peace through strength and diplomatic negotiation deal, which, and I think we've just forgotten that art, but that's really the key. Uh, that's really a force multiplier, in my opinion, for U.S. national security is to bring an end to potential conflicts with China over Taiwan and with Russia over Ukraine. But in terms of on an individual level, outside of telling our members of Congress to move, pressure Trump to do that,
Mhm.
I think we need to, first of all, we need to get right with Jesus. And I always say that, as a Christian, I
Absolutely.
believe we get right with God. We live, keep the commandments more faithfully. That's our number one, protection against all of these potential threats that could destroy our country and threaten the lives of our family members, but also food storage, water, solar panel. I have not just solar panels for your home, but like a Tesla power wall. That's something I
Mhm.
have, or something similar, some kind of backup power system. So those are all things that could bring peace of mind if you know that when the power goes out, the power will stay on. You might not be able to use air conditioning, heating, and various other things that cause a massive amount of energy. But you can have lights and various other things that you need for your family.
Yep.
But just having food and water storage, those are key, and guns and ammo, of course, for self defense. We can't forget about that because
Mhm.
uh, you know Jonathan Hollerman, um, our colleague, who also serves as the deputy executive director under Glenn Rhodes, has written extensively about how civilization would break down following a grid down event,
Yep.
either man-made or natural, and society breaks down, and people start um, going crazy in terms of with potential violence to try to fight over the last scraps of food or water, or limited food or water resources, potentially roving gangs that could with the breakdown of law and order come steal all your food and threaten your families. So there's a lot of threats that could essentially enable our enemies with the press of a button to detonate one of these super EMP satellites over the U.S. that could
Right.
take down the U.S., take out all of our critical infrastructure, but then essentially cause Americans to kill each other off so that by the time Chinese forces land, troops land in California, they could essentially, just land without resistance
Yeah.
because our country's, population might have been depleted to Ukraine levels.
Right. And I don't believe that they need to land anywhere. I believe they're already in Mexico and in Canada and
Yeah,
and inside this country. So, one of the things is, could we win a conventional war, against China and Russia? I mean, I believe that that war would come to within this country because we're not only infiltrated, but we literally are surrounded.
yeah, that's a great question. I mean, certainly with regards to China, their manufacturing base by purchase power parity is almost 4 times larger than ours,
Mhm.
closer to two in terms of nominal dollar terms, 200% larger. But they can produce weapons, advanced weapon systems, 5 to 6 times faster than we can. They can produce ships 232 times faster than we can. I mean, that's just astounding. We still have the best navy in the world, the strongest in terms of conventional, military might. Probably not nuclear might, but certainly conventional with our 11 aircraft carriers. But it would essentially be the Pacific War with Japan in reverse, where we probably could outproduce Japan 4 or 5 times more than they could in terms of military industrial capabilities, in terms of ships, and China would just sweep across the Pacific because even if we sunk the navy they have today, they're reportedly building a number of naval ships the size of the Royal Navy every year.
Hmm.
So, how many Royal Navies can they produce essentially? But it would, it's very daunting. And really, almost the best case scenario is that we'd lose the Pacific Fleet, and then our leaders would sue for peace that would not affect the U.S., but essentially would force us, to pull back to the Eastern Pacific or Central Pacific, leaving the Western Pacific under Chinese control. So, that's a scenario we don't want to have. I produced a peace plan that would essentially ensure Taiwan's at least short term to medium term self rule with some kind of EU confederation agreement between China and Taiwan. But ultimately, we just, whether it's that or simply telling China that we're not going to defend Taiwan militarily and that we support peaceful negotiations for resolving that dispute, I think would take away the nuclear threat to a large extent. Because I think there's a very real chance that we could get involved in a nuclear war with China. Because any war we have with China or Russia, I think on day one it's going to be day one of intense combat would likely involve a massive cyber attack on the U.S. homeland, as well as a massive counter space attack, which would take out all our satellites and uh, you know, deeply degrade our NC3 system. So that could be the prelude to super EMP or a prelude to a nuclear decapitation strike.
Yep.
Um, so a lot of people don't believe that nuclear war is possible. It's really astounding to me. Having lived through the Cold War, as I know you have,
Yeah.
um, I remember when there were massive protests against the Pershing II missiles deployed in Germany, the ground launched cruise missiles that Reagan, agreed to get rid of in exchange for Russia getting rid of its SS-20s, and there were millions of people protesting for a nuclear freeze. Which is essentially what we did. We implemented a nuclear freeze after actually we disarmed our nuclear arsenal by
Right.
unilaterally by 90%, and then we froze our nuclear arsenal.
I think
So
we
that
I think we only did. I don't believe they ever did.
no, they never did.
No, they
Yeah,
never did. Yeah.
yeah. I mean, certainly they decreased the size of their arsenal, but then they built it back
Right.
because they
Right.
had this massive their nuclear infrastructure. They never got rid of it.
Oh,
So and they
they,
just basically used the dollars that we sent them, the billions in non-lucrative funds, to get rid of their old warheads and finance the construction of new ones, thousands of new ones. So Yeah, we've never faced this such an existential threat from Russia and China before, and the alliance that they have with North Korea and Iran, of
Right.
course.
Yep.
Yeah, we're and even conventional weapons in terms of war in Europe. If we were to go to war with Russia, we know they outproduce us in some critical munitions and weapon systems by anywhere from 3 to 4 to 1 in terms of all of NATO. Russia spends more than all of European NATO combined in terms of purchase power parity, and those are all changes from that have materialized since we started fighting them in Ukraine. Before that, their military spending was much lower. The military was much smaller. Um, so yeah, there's been a lot of bad effects from our decision to fight Russia and Ukraine instead of go for the Istanbul Agreement, of course, which would have ended the war with a full Russian military withdrawal from all pre-war Ukrainian territory in April of 2022.
Yeah, well, if there was a nuclear conflict, I don't think anyone would win. I think the whole world would definitely lose. So let's hope it never comes to that. But obviously, there's a lot happening in this world, and uh, it's better to know and get your news. I'm going to post Dave's Substack link to get your news outside of the mainstream media, to be able to consume uh, facts, actual facts about what really the geopolitics of what's happening in this world. I can guarantee that mainstream news won't give you what we're presenting here in this podcast. So I'll put that up towards the end of the podcast. But I think Dave knows my stance because we've been in a lot of meetings, and I'm of course on the cybersecurity side of this, and I'd like for you to talk a little bit more about that because I personally believe um, that the first phase, like you mentioned earlier, will be a cyber attack just because it's so easy to do and there's so many back doors. And if you could maybe talk a little bit about China's footprint inside our critical infrastructure.
Yeah, absolutely, and yeah, I really appreciate all the expertise you bring to bear for in cybersecurity issues. I've learned a lot from you, and as well as some of Chinese electronics that are embedded in our own weapon systems in some cases that could potentially be used against us in war. But yeah, so China, of course, we know that China has, thanks to Michael Mabee, former Command Sergeant Major, he's been tracking this closely. And I think by last count, we have about 496 Obama and Biden purchased uh, transformers of both small and large transformers in the grid, the U.S. electrical grid, and I think that accounts for around 11% of our total transformers. So it's possible, would be possible for us to replace those over probably a decade, but I think it would take around that time. And there's just not a lot of we don't produce our own transformers anymore, so that's really daunting. We've
Right.
outsourced to China and also Germany and some other countries that are have that industrial capability that we allowed ourselves to get rid of. But essentially, China could just with that alone, China were to turn off, use a satellite signal to turn off all of its, again, almost 500 transformers in the U.S. electrical grid. That would likely result in a permanent, a grid down situation that could last well more than several weeks. It could be months or even years if indeed we were able to restore that, assuming that we didn't have, again, follow-on attacks exploiting that window of vulnerability. So, that's a critical vulnerability. The U.S. I think is probably the third most capable cyber offensive power. I think Russia's probably the best, followed by China. Iran's probably fifth, and North Korea is probably fourth. But in terms of cyber defense, our vulnerabilities are probably, the worst in the world. We don't have the cyber defenses we need, and that's why we were pushing for someone like you to to lead CISA CISA director to try to address those vulnerabilities as well as our vulnerabilities of our grid against super EAP attack. Because we have this massive, powerful U.S. conventional military,
Right.
Army, Navy, and Air Force, not as capable anymore than China's in some ways, but still one of the most powerful in the world. But that we use for power projection to Europe, the Middle East, and East Asia, and the Western Pacific. But we've neglected homeland and hemispheric defense, and especially missile defense, national missile defense, with which Trump is thankfully addressing with the Golden Dome,
Hmm.
that he's trying to get operational by 2028. But in terms of the defense against super EMP and cyber attack, the grid is our most important critical infrastructure that could be used to reconstitute our country following an attack like that. And it's just not protected right now. The level of protection is very low.
It is. It is. And you mentioned our brilliant military leaders, and after meeting many of you over the last couple of years since I've been on the task force, I'm an absolute agreement that I think America's military superiority in leadership, which brings me to an interesting uh, event that happened um, earlier in the month, which was all the generals being called in from all over. Do you have any comments about that? I would be curious to see what your perspective is as to why something like that would happen when the majority of them easily speak to each other, uh, virtually via whatever communications comms that they have. That's Do you have anything to add?
Yeah, yeah. So
Or
I
no
was
comment?
I speculated on that, and you're absolutely right. There's no reason we have secure comms. I'm
Hmm.
sure they're hackable by China
Yeah,
and Russia, but in terms of for routine non-war related meetings, there's simply no reason why we should have had that gathering. We could have simply had a small meeting of the Joint Chiefs of Staff and various four-star generals and four-star admirals in command of various elements of our military. That could have been at the Pentagon or perhaps even at the White House. The idea of having, I don't know, 500 to 600 general or flag officers and their command sergeant majors and master chiefs, senior master chiefs in the Navy and Air Force as well.
right.
Um, there's just no rationale for it, and it seemed like more of just kind of boosting morale, as Trump referred to esprit de corps.
Yeah.
I don't think it really did anything to boost morale. It was
No,
more
it did.
like we're putting you all on notice. We can
Exactly.
we can fire you in a second if
Yeah.
you
And it was
demonstrate that you're woke or that you oppose Trump's actions to restore law and order in our cities or anything of that nature.
right, or a reprimand of "You're too fat, so start working out."
That's
That's
right.
what that was the other thing I heard as well.
Yep.
Yeah, I found it interesting, and when I first heard about it, I thought to myself, "What a bad idea to have all our military leaders in one location. Anything could have happened. You
Yeah.
just never know." And yeah, I didn't particularly think that that was a good militarily a very good strategic move to have your entire leadership team in one location. But that's just my humble opinion. Um, let's see if we have some questions in the chat. Um, we have, I heard rumors about another Chinese biochem lab found in Virginia. Anyone know something about this? I think there's a lot more than the places we mentioned. Yeah, it's there's a lot going on right under our noses that we don't know. I mean, some of us can suspect, but and I'm sure our intelligence agencies know. But do you want to add to that?
Yeah, I think so. There was that one that was discovered in California. I think it was 2 or 3 years ago, and then I think there was a second one as well. We don't know as much details about that one, but I haven't heard about the Virginia one.
Yeah, I hadn't even.
But these are all ongoing. I mean, we have so many different Chinese operations that are being waged against us in our own country. There was the whole expose about Chinese um servers that could be used to take down all of our emergency uh, workers, like law enforcement and emergency responders in New York City and various other locations. Those are likely things that, systems they have deployed nationwide in all of our large cities. And I would be shocked if they didn't have those kind of bio weapons labs
Hmm.
in those farmlands they own. I mean, some of the farmlands they own are vast. I mean, I live in Utah, and I think around 35% of Utah farmlands are owned. Actually, the map that I looked that I saw, it shows 35% of the counties in terms of the total area. So it's not actually, that's not how much land they own. But even if they own 6%, I mean 6%
Right.
of the land in some of our rural states, more rural states like Utah, that's enough, to hide, all kinds of bad situations. I mean, look at Hamas, and they're able to produce long range rockets in underground tunnels.
Yeah.
And we could have the same type of system, underground missile or weapons of mass destruction facilities here in our own country.
Well, I saw a drone demo, which basically it's just a little bit larger than a carry-on suitcase, and it could be yeah, you know exactly what I'm talking about. It could be dropped anywhere, out in the middle of the desert. Okay, it has 4G LTE communications or satellite, or maybe all three. And at any point in time, the suitcase can open up and launch a drone. Or maybe if it's a little bit bigger, it could have a swarm of drones to do a particular task. And that these can be easily deposited throughout any country, the United States being that. So there, the tech, which brings us to drone attacks on the grid, which I'd like for you to talk about that. You probably have a more insight into that technology than I do.
Yeah, probably they have drone swarms. We heard, of course, late last year there were drone swarms over the capital region. I think it was Langley Air Force Base in Virginia and some other locations. And I can just imagine being the commanding general of one of those military bases, walking out, one or two star, and looking up in the sky and seeing a swarm of drones and not being able to do anything about it because they weren't. Our commanding generals of our military bases weren't allowed to shoot them down. Our anti-drone capabilities, I think, at that point were pretty low. So maybe we shot many of them down. We saw just with Russia sending 19 surveillance drones over Poland. We had an F-35 fighter and other fifth generation fighters and fourth generation fighters that from multiple countries that were only able to shoot down 3 or 4 out of 19 before the rest scattered and went back to Russia. But yeah, I mean, just the very fact that they can do those kind of drone swarms. I
Yeah,
mean, what if one of those were equipped with a nuclear suitcase bomb or a
exactly.
conventional EMP that could, take down an entire military base? Well, probably wouldn't be an entire military base, but maybe if they position over, a large transformer on base
Right.
or something like that, could conceivably done with a low number of EMP drones. So yeah, that is a very major threat. It's there's I've just never seen so many threats to the U.S. that are existential or near existential,
Yeah.
and we're doing almost nothing about them. We
Right. And they're
keep fighting.
simultaneously happening, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, this should be our entire focus. And to his credit, President Trump does have a national defense strategy that's apparently being vetoed by our military commanders who want us permanently deployed in the Middle East and Europe and East Asia and the Western Pacific.
Hmm.
But he does have a strategy that focuses like a laser on homeland and hemispheric defense. And that includes missile defense, includes cyber defense, includes border security, increased border security, probably increased port security. of course, with the containers. I mean, that really just needs to be our focus. And, I wouldn't, I don't think we should be spending a dime on a foreign war or sending any military aid to Ukraine or Israel or even Taiwan until we finish hardening the grid against DMP
Yeah.
attack and finish deploying a full-scale, comprehensive, multi-layer national missile defense system, because those threats are just so huge. And I would add, finding and apprehending and expelling all 100,000 or as many as we can find Chinese, troops in our own country,
Exactly.
special forces, airborne troops.
They,
Who knows what they have?
there's quite a bit. It's interesting. I have relatives in Colombia. I'm from there, and there's a border town right by the Colombia and Panama, and there's that jungle there. I can't right off the top of my head. You probably know it. Um,
Yep,
there's a little was a Colombian town, but now it's almost all Chinese. Oh, the Darien Gap. That's the name of
Darien
it.
Gap. That's
The
right.
Darien Gap. So it was a little just know nothing border town, selling arepas and who knows what else. And now it's there's Chinese restaurants everywhere. This is from my relative.
Yeah.
So they're coming up from South America, not just the illegal immigrants. I mean, you're talking military troops. And I believe Nicaragua also, is it Nicaragua or El Salvador has a Chinese port, a rather large one that, of course, they paid for. Um, and so these threats are real. I mean, we're not trying to fearmonger, but we're trying to educate the American people on what's really out there, because you're not going to hear this on the news. You really won't. And Glenn Rhodes asks, any thoughts about Chinese bio threats? Well, yeah, you want to address that?
Yeah.
Obviously, the drones would be a perfect vehicle of delivery right over a major city. So, David, I'll let you take it away.
Yeah, so of course we had COVID-19 that originated from the Wuhan military institute where they produce bioweapons,
Right.
and that was an accidental release. It was an accidental release in China that they then deliberately spread to the U.S. and our allies, that subsequently spread to the world to kill as many Americans as possible, to potentially influence. I won't go into detail on that, but influence the 2020 presidential election by crashing the economy and other measures. So that absolutely is a threat. We know that since 1990, China has been under Deng Xiaoping. They began researching a DNA-based bioweapon that would kill all non-Chinese. So
Yes.
Caucasians would be die from it, but the Chinese would be immune to
Right.
it. So thankfully, they haven't that we know of. They haven't achieved that. I don't think they will anytime soon. But the very fact that they're thinking of exterminating, 80%
Nationality.
of the
Yeah.
American people through a bioweapon is really quite terrifying.
Right. Right. David Moran says decentralized EMP, GMD, hardened infrastructures to restart after a black sky event, not a matter of if, but when. Um, do you want to add to that? I mean, if something happens, I don't believe right now we are capable of a restart.
Yeah, I mean, a restart would be extremely difficult, to accomplish, and there's all kinds of different ideas, from having extra grid, extra transformers on hand to install. But we typically have a reserve of about 3% of transformers. So, assuming we have the equipment operational, and it probably wouldn't, because some of those transformers are the weight of a Navy patrol boat, about 250 or even 280 tons at the largest, would be extremely difficult to install. It takes, I think, several months in some instances to get those installed. It's in years. It takes around 18 months, I think, minimum, just to get them ordered. um, because again, we can't produce those. So yeah, those are all good ideas.
Hmm.
Whether it's microgrids or having some kind of grid hardening that occurs on military bases or rural areas that we can we could essentially reconstitute our country, or at least part of our country, and kind of build outward, rebuild civilization. Those are all ideas that we're exploring in the absence of national action, by Congress or the president. And I want to say that President Trump has been the only U.S. president that has ever taken action to try to defend our citizens against the EMP attack. Reagan didn't do it. Bush didn't do it. Neither President Bush did it. But President Trump did pass an executive order that at least helped. It didn't fund EMP hardening, but it did a lot of implemented a lot of our other recommendations.
Hmm.
And so we're very grateful to have him and Secretary of Defense Hegseth, who are aware of the threat of EMP attack and super EMP attack, as well as super solar storms, and are willing to think about what we can do to defend against it. But we really need what I've been pushing for the last 4 or 5 years is that we need a presidential declaration of national emergency. Under the National Emergencies Act, the
Hmm.
president is authorized in some instances to declare a national emergency and then repurpose congressionally authorized funding from other areas, perhaps other areas of our military or Department of Energy to spend on hardening the grid or even building a national missile defense system. But the grid, I think, is he's working on missile defense already, but there's almost nothing being spent on to harden our grid. Nothing that I'm aware of to harden the grid, and that's again very terrifying because the threat is so great.
Yep. Yeah. Well, we're at 3:11. I mean, it's been a very enjoyable conversation, and I thank you so much, David, for appearing on the podcast and enlightening and educating us on all the various topics that we touched on. Did you want to add a closing statement to maybe address anything we didn't touch on? I believe we went through we went through a lot.
Yeah. Well, thanks, Maria. It's been a pleasure, and I really appreciate your leadership in getting this podcast started. This grid podcast is really important to us in getting the public informed, but also U.S. policymakers informed about all these threats and
Yep.
what we can do to hedge against them should those threats materialize. And I just want to encourage anyone who's watching this podcast to please go to our website at emptaskforce.us, where you can volunteer to help lead some of our state EMP task force organizations, as well and contribute in other ways, as well as to provide some donations, badly needed donations, because we are, of course, a nonprofit,
Hmm.
and so we need your help in that way as well. And then for anyone who wants to learn more about the national security updates that I'm providing, please go to my website at dpyne.substack.com. Once again, dpyne.substack.com. That's my Real War website where I publish a lot of the same type of articles that we're discussing right now.
Yeah. Yeah, I put that up right underneath your name, so everyone should be. You should go there. It's definitely a blog worth joining. And so I want to thank you again, and I want to thank our Grid Warrior audience for watching. And for next week, we have on Wednesday, October 15th, we have Dr. Drew Miller. He's a best-selling author and president of Fortitude Ranch. Dr. Miller served as General Petraeus' staff in Iraq and in the Department of Defense. And this ought to be a very, very enlightening conversation on what I call bug out communities as well as he will be discussing his new book, Preparing to Survive in the Age of Collapse. So, with that, I want to say thank you and have a great rest of your day, and see you next week.